The industrial air scrubbers in the high council chamber began to whine, a pitch so high it made my secondary hearing slits twitch with a persistent, dull ache. The scent of scorched metal shouldn't have been there in a room designed for the delicate exchange of trade routes and mining rights. Behind the grand dais, the massive cooling fans for the atmospheric processors shifted into their highest gear, struggling to filter a substance they were never meant to encounter. It was a rhythmic, straining sound like a hydraulic pump trying to move thick, cooling lead instead of a standard nitrogen-argon mix. Wren Calloway sat in the human delegation's seat, her fingers resting lightly on her left wrist. She wasn't looking at the glowing displays or the 600 species watching her from the tiered benches. She was counting her own heartbeat. Occasionally, her lips would move, a silent tally of her internal rhythm, which meant she was tracking her own biological stability in a room that was rapidly losing its own. Would you have noticed the shift in the room's chemistry? Or would you have waited until the warnings turned from amber to red? Wren didn't run, even when the air began to taste like a welding shop. My terminal flickered. A single word scrolled across the diagnostic bar. Corrosive. It was an incomplete data packet, a warning that the sensors near the human delegation were registering a molecular anomaly. The reading was impossible. If the air in that quadrant were truly corrosive, the silk of the human suit would be dissolving before our eyes. Corrosive. I glanced at Wren. She adjusted her collar and smoothed a small, knitted baby booty against the surface of her desk. It was a soft, pale thing that looked absurdly fragile in the sterile light of the chamber. She looked perfectly healthy. Delegate Calloway, Senior Delegate Ashran said, his voice as smooth as polished obsidian. We shall begin with the atmospheric baseline for the Sol system. Please confirm the primary composition of your planetary environment for the record. Wren leaned toward the microphone, her movement fluid and deceptively graceful for a species evolved on a high-gravity world. The sound of her exhalation hit the acoustic sensors with a heavy thud, and the amber light on my desk turned a steady, ominous orange that reflected off the polished metal of my terminal. Static began to pop and hiss across the local translation field as the microscopic moisture from her breath interacted with the ion emitters. It created a shimmering, distorted halo around her head, a visual glitch that made her look like she was slowly coming apart. Certainly, Wren said. She cleared her throat, a wet, heavy sound that caused the delegate from the dry world of Sul to slide their chair back 6 inches. The pressure is standard 1 bar. Our base is primarily nitrogen. Ashran nodded. He signaled for me to project the human's atmospheric file onto the central display. I hesitated. Is there a delay, Clerk Kalen? Ashran asked. His secondary eyes focused on my trembling fingers. The sensors are fluctuating, Senior Delegate, I replied. My hands felt cold. There is a chemical presence near the human delegate that I cannot immediately categorize. Wren looked up, her expression one of genuine concern. She reached for a glass of water, her hand steady. The knitted booty sat next to the glass, a tiny reminder of a world that didn't seem possible. She took a sip. The simple act of swallowing sent a ripple of unease through the nearby delegations. Oh, she whispered. Is it the humidity? I was told the room might be a bit dry. I forced the manual override, my digits blurring across the crystalline interface to bypass the sensor's defensive lockout. The central display flickered, the orange warning light casting long, jagged shadows across the senior delegate's face as the raw data finally parsed through the translation filters. Ashran Mole stood, his primary hands gripping the edge of the dais so hard the decorative inlay began to crack. He wasn't watching the numbers. He was watching Wren's throat, convinced the vibration of her vocal cords was the precursor to a thermal detonation. Wren paused to adjust the button on her left cuff, smoothing the fabric with a steady, clinical precision. The readout is confirmed, I whispered, though my voice carried through the silent hall. Oxygen. 21% molecular concentration. The central chamber dissolved into an absolute avalanche of silk and panicked terror. Delegates scrambled over the tiered benches, their robes tangling in the armrests as they bolted for the pressurized emergency airlocks. The Oshkari guards didn't move to intercept them. They retreated toward the ventilation shafts, their rebreathers huffing in desperate, rapid cycles. Molecular oxygen is a volatile, aggressive element that seeks to tear electrons from every surface it touches, fueling the very fires that incinerate cities and corrode the strongest alloys known to the Oshkari engineers. Most species in the known sectors considered 5% to be a fatal industrial hazard, yet this human sat in the center of the storm, her biological systems seemingly thriving on a gas that functioned as a continuous internal explosion. On Earth, this was not a toxin. It was the fundamental currency of life, the invisible engine that allowed a Bristol midwife to stand for 18 hours on a hospital floor, her lungs pulling in the very fire the council feared. Is that not standard? Wren asked, her voice echoing in the rapidly emptying hall. She looked at the frantic display, her brow furrowed in a confusion that we had mistaken for a threat. We also have nitrogen, 78%. Is that also a problem? Ashran Mole didn't answer. He hit the quorum break button with a trembling fist, a jagged alarm bell signaling the immediate dissolution of the session and the indefinite suspension of Earth's membership. Within 40 minutes, the diplomatic wing was a ghost town, cordoned off by high-intensity containment fields and automated medical drones. I stood behind the safety of a reinforced glass partition, watching the human delegate via a remote camera. Wren was alone in the center of the silent auditorium, her delegate file glowing on the screen above her. Class 12 Deathworld. Corrosive atmosphere confirmed. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the knitted booty, turning the soft wool over in her hands. She thought of a boy named Arthur, born 3 weeks ago in a small room in Bristol, whose first act of existence was to scream as he filled his tiny, untried lungs with that same corrosive fire. To us, she was a walking catastrophe, a creature draped in a shroud of reactive poison. To her, she was just a woman who remembered the warmth of a nursery. Wren stood up and gathered her notes. She tucked the booty back into her pocket, the wool catching slightly on the edge of her seat. The central display remained active, the number 21% pulsing in a steady, rhythmic blue against the dark. A single silver stylus lay abandoned on the floor near her chair. The industrial scrubbers hummed at a low, mournful frequency in the distance. Wren walked toward the exit, her footsteps soft on the polished stone. The heavy airlock door cycled shut behind her with a dull, metallic thud. The glowing readout reflected off the empty water glass on her desk.